Hello, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that break. Now we are on the final home straight and we're starting off our final session of the day with Mike Fell. Will be returning after being in our previous panel. Mike is the Executive Director of the National Cyber Operations for NHS England. And in this keynote speech, Mike will be discussing lessons from the NHS cyber frontline, from strategy to patient safety, where he will talk to the evolving threat landscape in health, explain how we help protect the 140,000 organisations that make up the NHS, summarise the strategy and share key lessons from recent incidents. I'm really delighted to welcome back Mike Fell.
Thank you very much. So over 1.5 million staff, millions of cases of healthcare being given out every week, over 80,000 suppliers. The National Health Service is a significant and critically important organisation for the country, but it is not a single organisation. As well, while some of our adversaries, particularly ransomware operators, have very nice statements saying that they will not target the health sector, the reality is that that isn't the case, and that isn't something that we can take confidence in. The headline incident within health sector is absolutely the WannaCry incident back in 2017, unbelievably kind of over 5 years, 6 years ago now. And that really did kind of set the ball rolling about what we talk about as a cybersecurity issue. But my case today is that rather than viewing this as a cybersecurity issue, we really need to address this as a patient safety issue. The clinicians increasingly rely on digital solutions. The strategy for the health sector relies on large-scale use of data to improve patient outcomes and real-time use of that information and access to supply chains, to digital solutions to deliver care. That was hugely disruptive in 2017, causing £93 million of assessed damage and also delayed health outcomes. What we've seen since then is a real evolution. When we look back, that seems like quite an unsophisticated attack. As we moved through the pandemic, we saw the rapid digitalization of things. The use of the NHS app increased from 1 million users in 2019 to over 30 million users through 2022, and that increased the threat surface, and we started seeing abuse of the NHS brand. Despite the assurances of cyber criminals that the health sector was sacrosanct, in 2021, we saw the Irish health system attacked by the Conti ransomware group. Disruptive to the point where the military had to be brought in, and fantastic lessons from that are available in the very detailed report that was published, role modeling the transparency that really helps here. And then within the UK and England, last summer, we saw an attack on one of a critical supplier known as Advanced. At the time, we weren't aware centrally, but they support 80% of the 111 providers in this country, as well as a whole range of other ones. And that was a tipping point for the health system in understanding the risks within the supply chain. So the strategy for health and the public, the patient safety that is critical to the health service is really built on these kind of foundations of the digital solutions. And the threats that we see have evolved since 2017 into those seen elsewhere. The use of ransomware, double extortion are seen in a regular basis in an attempt to target the health sector. We see the supply chain being targeted increasingly. But we also handle with over 1.5 million staff involved in the NHS. We're conscious of the unintended, accidental, and in some cases, directed insider threats. We see the NHS as a brand being targeted, and through the COVID period, there were attempts to extort that brand for financial gain, selling COVID passports that were available for free, obviously. And we also see with over £100 billion of money going through the health system, we see cyber-enabled fraud as a threat. So moving on from that unsophisticated attack of 5 years ago, we really do have a kind of whole ecosystem of threats here. Moving on to the next slide, as well as the threat, that becomes realized in a range of different ways here. Again, rather than being unique, the health system is very similar to other sectors in terms of the percentages of things that we see exploited. We see the absence of foundational controls and foundational issues being exploited. That looks like out of support IT, the exploitations of critical vulnerabilities. We've seen the Log4Shell vulnerability over 18 months old now, targeted in recent attempts. We also see the absence of multi-factor authentication and weak credentials, password reuse being exploited. And ultimately, as well, as we kind of move the narrative from that of defense into a truly cyber resilient system, the importance of logging and being able to kind of investigate things when we see them as suspicious is something that that can aid in these threats. Moving on to the next slide, please. I'm now going to talk a little bit about a more positive angle to this. So since WannaCry, there's been many hundreds of millions of pounds invested in cybersecurity across the health system, and we really have moved the dial. There is a whole range of central support that is delivered through NHS England to help all of those ultimately 140,000 plus organisations that contribute. We hang things off the central strategy here. So we talk to defending as one. And defending as one in health is complex because risks in some cases are best owned locally and in other cases are best owned nationally. And that's the question that is always asked in providing services to the system is, are we better to support local organisations to manage that risk locally or to deliver something nationally? So there is a range of these national products that have stopped and prevented a number of attempts that could have been as disruptive as WannaCry had these controls not been in place. And these look a little bit like centralised monitoring. So there is a central security operations centre within NHS England that has visibility over 1.5 million plus devices using kind of recognised industry products, and as a result is able to prevent and respond quickly to attempts to exploit and access systems. We also nationally run a toolkit known as the Data Security Protection Toolkit, which introduces a level of assurance and gives us a visibility about the weaknesses and the systemic risks that are across the system. By understanding those challenges, we're able to design the future and ensure that our strategy reflects the risks as they are on the ground. We also, as well as enabling, have the delegated authority for the NIS regulations and regulate the sector to make sure that ultimately, whilst we clearly wish to support, enable, where there are recurrent and kind of problematic issues, we do have the regulatory element through the Department of Health's delegation for the NIS regulations. So as a result of that, kind of a huge amount of work here. We have networks of associates, the Cyber Associates Network with over 2,000 interested people who can receive threat intelligence, that can receive awareness and act as force multipliers. Like all kind of large organizations, we use the automated protections and protect billions of transactions daily through these controls, as well as a centralized response capability with cyber incident response, so that when things do go wrong, we've got a trust that we know that we will be having those the right responders to go in and to ensure that we learn the lessons. So that's the range of support that is available at the moment, but it's not a laurel that we rest on, and we obviously look to the future around how we can continue to protect the system. Next slide, please. So when we combine that understanding of the threat, which is increasing and particularly over the last 18 months has taken on a geopolitical dimension too, including denial of service attempts. When we combine that with the intelligence and the information that we see from the tools that I've just described and that visibility, we have a strategy in place to address this. It hangs off the National Cyber Strategy and reflects that, but is tailored to the specifics of the health sector. And ultimately, what we want to do is have this NHS and social care system that is resilient to cyber attacks, that can bounce back quickly. We move on from that kind of concept that we are going to be able to stop and defend against everything and really look about that proportional resilience. And the way that we talk about doing that is firstly by focusing on the greatest threats and harms. We are not able to protect everything, and indeed it wouldn't be proportionate. It wouldn't be a good use of taxpayers' money to protect everything to the highest level. So we need to understand the greatest threats, the greatest and the riskiest assets, and protect those. We also, despite the complexity of over 1.5 million members of staff, 140,000 organizations, that brings challenges, but it brings a real opportunity. And this defense as one principle is something that we regularly benefit from. By having that visibility, the canary in the mine, so to speak, where we see something happening in one organization, we can immediately play that back against all of those organizations that are part of the community. And that's a really important principle as we go forward, to see that kind of asymmetry that we often face here as a positive that we can benefit from, as well as kind of having to manage. And underpinning all of this, at the center of it, is the people and the culture. Not only do we need to ensure that we have the right skilled people to help manage these risks, we also need to raise the awareness. And a way in which we do that is starting to move the culture. And the strategy talks to having a just culture, one in which people feel free to speak up where they see a risk and don't feel that there's going to be a blame approach. And that really is kind of an important principle as we continue to move to cyber resilience, so that we are learning at every opportunity and supporting people to feel confident to say something when they see risk. And as well as those kind of defensive principles, we need to build secure for the future. Like all large organizations, we face legacy and we see things that were not designed to be secure from the outset. We can turn the tap off on that. We need to address those legacy issues, which we do through focusing on the greatest threats and harms. But we can definitely fix that going forward. And colleagues across the public sector talk very powerfully about this. The Ministry of Defence are particularly kind of vocal about the secure by design approach. And that's something that is also really important within the national systems, within the systems that are owned at local levels, and within the supply chain. And finally, the exemplary response and recovery is a really important pillar of the strategy. We cannot anticipate that we are able to stop everything. And indeed, it's arguably not proportionate to do so. However, we can prepare for that. We can make sure that patient safety is really considered throughout this by minimizing the impact and making sure that we have muscle memory that we've practiced for incident responses in advance. And again, there's some principles underneath here. You know, increasingly technology is important. It's critical for the delivery of health. The attack surface is increasing, and the trust in the digital elements of healthcare, the NHS app, the various ways in which we kind of engage with the health system mean that the attack surface is increasing. But cyber will always be seen as non-negotiable in this context. So that was the ultimately the kind of evolution of things that I've kind of walked us through here. Hopefully through that, you've seen that there is this balanced approach. We do face a pernicious threat like many sectors. And despite the protestations of some of our adversaries that they would never dare to kind of touch something as sacrosanct as health records, sadly, that isn't the reality. but by the existing solutions that we have deployed, by the really important work done by a whole range of people across the health and care system, in combination with this new strategy that was launched back in March. Hopefully we have a compelling kind of vision to bring together what is a really kind of disaggregated, separate system behind a single vision, to unify it, allow people the flexibility to kind of manage risks in different ways, but ultimately with that kind of vision of that cyber resilient health and care system, so that we all can have the care and health solutions that we rely on every day. Thank you very much
for giving your time to present your keynote to us and outline just what the NHS is doing to protect itself and us, of course, from cyber attacks. Thank you for joining us today. Right, we're going to move on to our final panel of the day, Secure by Cloud. Now, the public sector is in the process of one of the biggest digital transformations it has ever seen, with many organisations at differing stages of their journey, resulting in a more digitally accessible sector. With the pandemic highlighting the need for migration to cloud services to effectively collaborate and continue to provide public services, where do public sector leaders start to unlock value from their data both safely and securely? Alongside digital transformational change comes security challenges, and with the UK government's cloud first policy outlining the importance of cloud services, organisations are under pressure to ensure that they have secure cloud services. In this panel, we aim to learn and listen to experts in the field about the importance of secure by cloud. So let me welcome our panellists. We have David Terrett, who is CEO at the Cloud Industry Forum, Simon Newman, who is CEO of Cyber Resilience Centre for London, Pete Field, who's Head of Programme Cyber and National Security for Tech UK, and Helen Coombe, who's the Cabinet Member for Resources and Transformation at the London Borough of Redbridge. Welcome to you all, and just a reminder, this is the last chance to put your questions to our panellists, so please keep those questions coming in. So I just thought it'd be great to get an initial sense of your sort of focus on cloud, your experience of cloud, and what your current role is. So let's kick off with David.
Hi everyone. Well, obviously the Cloud Industry Forum is it's a not-for-profit, membership-driven trade body with a member, all sorts of different cloud companies as members. Me personally, I've actually been involved with cloud and software as a service solutions before we started calling them that. So, my background goes back quite a long way.
That's lovely. Thank you, David. And Simon?
Yeah, hello everyone. I work for the Cyber Resilience Centre for London. We're a government-funded organisation to help businesses, charities, the voluntary sector improve their cyber resilience against those common threats. And obviously, cloud is a really important part of that. So we're there to give them support and help, and hopefully end up with what we describe as an informed customer.
Excellent. Dan?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm from Tech UK, I lead the cyber security programme, and Tech UK, for those that don't know, is the National Trade Association for the digital and technology sectors in the UK. Programme I work on covers all technologies, but obviously cloud's a vital part of our digital infrastructure.
That's wonderful, thank you. And last but not least, Helen.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm the Cabinet Member for Resources and Transformation. So that covers IT, it covers digital, it covers information governance, all sorts of those things, which all come together in the need and the necessity to move some of our systems to the cloud. Because as you can imagine, it's a large London borough. We have all sorts of different things that we have to deliver. And so we have some cloud-based systems, but we still have quite a few legacy systems as well. So this is why it's interesting to us.
Excellent, thank you so much. So I thought we could start with a bit of a broad question to begin with. First of all, is moving everything to the cloud the right approach? Simon, let's start with you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. When the government's new strategy is very much around cloud first. So the idea is that certainly in central government departments, it's now mandatory and it's advisable for other public sector organisations to. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. And one of the reasons being, as we've seen through the pandemic in particular, is that we've got a far more flexible workforce these days. The network that we cover is so much broader than it was 5 or 6 years ago. So it's absolutely the right thing to do. It also, I think, offers more security in some ways. And I'm not going to say that it's 100% secure because nothing is, but it certainly allows us more control over certain things than perhaps using physical based servers have in the past. So my personal view is I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. Also allows us to innovate as well, which is great, and work with some really good vendors and partners out there who can ultimately help us manage the data demands of the future in a more secure way.
Excellent, thank you. And David, I'm guessing you're going to say it's the right approach, but it would be great to get a sense of why.
Well, I definitely think it's the right approach, and actually, one of the things that the forum does every year is a research project, and we publish the results. It was April this year, and wasn't just public sector. It was a cross industry sample of retail and manufacturing and technology companies and the like. Those respondents, 42% were talking about going either cloud first or they were in the process of migrating to the cloud. 55% of them had some sort of hybrid cloud, multi-cloud installations they were managing, and 2% were staying on premise. Obviously, we champion and advocate for the move into the cloud, but it's important to understand that there are no one-size-fits-all solutions, and so it's a matter of finding the right kind of cloud infrastructure for the particular workload and job that you're migrating.
Excellent, thank you. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I agree with everything that Simon and Dave have just talked about there. For me, looking across lots of different sectors and also lots of different government and public sectors, we often have a habit in our own little stovepipes and sectors to say that, our sector's different and special and we need to do it a certain way. And that's true to a certain extent, but obviously sectors and government departments are completely unique. So this trend towards cloud first is, I think, certainly the right one. And it also, it's a complex environment, right? So each implementation will be slightly different, but that's I suppose why the infrastructure is so useful, because it can allow you to unlock that innovation in your particular space using tools that we're using in industry all the time, and government can see that benefit as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And Helen, what's your experience been like at the London Borough of Redbridge when it comes to integrating cloud and also cybersecurity?
Well, obviously, cybersecurity is a big thing for all of us, and particularly, we hold a lot of data as a local authority, and that data's precious to us. It's precious to the residents, and we have to make sure that actually we protect it from threat, and that we're able to use it. So one of the things about migrating to the cloud and then when we buy new systems is that actually we ask the right questions so that we're confident in the security of our data. And so we use the NCSC. My life's full of acronyms that don't ask me what the words are, but we all know, don't we? Actually we stick to those principles so that when we're looking at the maturity level of a supplier, that we can be confident in that, and that we can be confident that we can be resilient and, should the need arise, recover. Yeah,
thank you. And Simon, you mentioned earlier, I think, that nothing is 100% secure, and there have been a few cases where data on the cloud has been compromised. So, is it as secure as it's claimed to be?
See, I'd love to say a yes, no answer, and I think I'm going to say two words. It depends. I think one of the challenges we've got is that lots of cyber criminals recognise, exactly as Helen's just made the point there, that local authorities, other public sector organisations hold huge amounts of very sensitive data, which clearly has a value to cyber criminals, and therefore they will go after places where that data is stored. So the cloud is constantly under attack from these type of individuals and more organized gangs. That's why it's so important, I think, when you're developing a strategy for the cloud, that you work very closely with vendors and you look at what security measures they've got in place. And that needs to be part of that process. So the types of things that government have produced recently, as Helen again mentioned, the NCSC have produced a really helpful guide for the public sector in terms of the principles that you should be considering, and that includes around governance, the shared responsibility model as well, which is really important. So it is secure, but I think the other thing we also mentioned as well, and technology changes so rapidly. And we're constantly seeing new innovative technology arrive in the UK market from all around the world. How do we keep a lid, and how do we make sure that the technology we're using is secure? And this is where I think government play a really important role in putting down standards, they create principles, and possibly even legislation that means that we're all starting from a minimum point where that security is built in right at the very design of these systems and processes. Otherwise, the risk is we end up buying technology that puts us at huge risk. And as you mentioned earlier, we've seen attacks on councils in the last few years, which have caused huge problems, not just for service users, but also for the councils and others as well. So I think in summary, it is certainly more secure than typical base servers, but we should never rely on the fact that everything is 100% secure, and we obviously need to constantly monitor the threats that are out there.
Thank you. And David, in terms of how local authorities and public sector leaders kind of think about cybersecurity when they are moving to the cloud, this sort of digital transformation that we're seeing, what are some of your kind of tips or pointers, the things that we should be thinking about?
Well, in terms of digital transformation, obviously, security is a big component of any solution you're going to look at. And I think that the key thing about digital transformation is that it's not a one-time project. It should be a mindset. It should be a continuous process. Organizations should be continually challenging themselves to do better and improve the services. And then when it comes to the cloud infrastructure, I can agree with the others that you can argue that the cloud is definitely more secure, but nothing's 100% secure. And part of the problem we've got is that the bad actors are getting more and more sophisticated with more and more sophisticated tools, and it's kind of like an arms race between us and them, keeping pace with keeping our systems secure.
And building on that, Helen, obviously with experience as a public sector leader, do you feel that the cloud-first approach is safe? Should we be concerned?
I think we have to be concerned about anything. I mean, in the old days, we had to be concerned about people taking pieces of paper out and leaving them on the bus. So everybody actually has to have that awareness about being safe, being cyber secure, and that it's not just like David was saying, it's not just a one-off thing, because obviously, there's constant change. Change is the name of the game, really, in IT, isn't it? So things change, and so we have to, if we've bought a system, we have to monitor it continuously to make sure that the things that we need are still in place, and that any changes we might want to make because something new has happened or we've got a new issue, that any change that we make or want to make, we make sure that actually it doesn't have a bad effect on something that we've already got.
And Dan, how do public sector leaders kind of approach cloud and cybersecurity through your experience? What's the best way of looking at it so that we are thinking of safety as well as transforming, our services digitally?
Sure, I think it's probably fair to say that within the tech sector, we too focused on the tech itself. So we look first at, we need to get this new shiny technology implemented as soon as possible. I think Mike in the previous session did a really good job about talking about how digital transformation really matters for service users and citizens. And I think you've got to view successful implementation through a lens of not just the technology, but also the process and the people that are using it. And none of those three factors are more important than the other. So yeah, we've got the tech and it's available and it can unlock some great potential. But if it's not widely used or if it's not appropriately used, then it's not going to unlock that bit that Mike were talking about, which is the bit that it's all worth doing for.
Yeah, thank you. And just a reminder, as we're sort of halfway through the panel, if there are any questions that you want to put to our speakers, please do pop them into the Q&A box, and I'll try and put them to the speakers while they're with us. So kind of a bit of a specific question for you, Simon. How do public sector leaders effectively communicate the benefits of cloud migration to elected members or relevant executive boards? And do you have any examples of where that's worked?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually, because I think we've seen some challenges in recent years where technology leaders have struggled perhaps to convey the benefits or really justify perhaps the expense of the cloud migration to elected councillors and so on. I think for me, it's about keeping things really simple. What I've seen work really well are things like dashboards, articulating benefits in the terms that councillors really recognise. So Dan just made a really good point there about service users, but also the other benefits in terms of how it can improve efficiency. One of the main reasons why the government have got the cloud first strategy is about reduced costs, and can cite a number of examples, including a project in the Home Office recently, which was estimated to save not an insignificant sum of hundreds of millions of pounds by moving to a cloud approach. So I think it's thinking about how councillors think, the things that are important to them, but also I would say early engagement's really good as well, and keeping those councillors informed and updated of why this is important. What you don't want to do is being a public sector leader simply going into a council meeting and presenting this huge great project which has a multi-million pound cost attached to it, and expect them to approve it. They'll want to understand more about it. So I think early engagement's really good, getting those benefits across in a way that councillors understand, and using things like dashboards, and focusing on some really simple things is a good starter for 10.
Yeah, and Helen, I've got to go to you next. You are our only councillor in the
I've been there.
room. You've been there. Can you share some of your experiences and insights?
I think that when we all had to move online during the pandemic, I think that's got rid of a lot of arguments, actually. So we know that we can do it, the council can do it, the councillors can do it, the officers can do it. It's not always easy, and there's still a reticence from some councillors and from residents as well, which is one of the things that we actually need to take a different tack towards, to say, not only is it more efficient for the council in itself in delivery of services, but it's actually, used properly, should actually free up the time that people who can't get online need, and the extra attention that they need. So it gives that officer time, and also as a sideways move, actually helping more people get online, because people are still actually quite sort of suspicious, aren't they, about doing things online, transacting online with the council. Why would I give you my bank card? All of that kind of thing. So we have to be able to reassure people that their data is safe with us.
And Helen, out of interest, is that sort of a small minority that are worried sometimes about cloud, or do you find there's a kind of general mood of kind of worry about where data is being stored?
I think this, it's a general worry, and that's not a bad thing in itself, is it? Because actually it does make people more careful. They're more aware of the pitfalls, and then it ups everybody's game. So it's difficult, but it can be useful too.
Yeah. Well, I've just noticed we've got a sort of a comment really. So it might be something just to throw in. Daljit has been talking. Sorry, put this question or comment really in, saying cloud first does not always mean all applications and data should be hosted in the public cloud. Hybrid cloud is still relevant for some scenarios. Now, I have to admit, I'm not very au fait when it comes to the difference between a public and a hybrid cloud. Perhaps everyone in this room is, but any thoughts on that? If anyone would like to pick it up?
I'll have a go.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, I think they're right, and it comes back to something I mentioned earlier. I think depending on what you're doing in terms of your digital transformation, you might be doing a lift and shift of an existing application just onto new infrastructure, or you might be refactoring it, or you might be rewriting it from scratch, and there might be different types of requirements depending on what you're doing, and actually I think necessarily, although when we started talking about cloud back in 2007, which is kind of the year that we started using that term in anger, we probably at that time thought that there was one cloud we could move to where we do everything, and the reality is more complex than that, and just about every organization is necessarily dealing with a multi-cloud situation where some things may be in a public cloud, maybe they've actually got a foot in more than one of the camps, but they're also doing some things on a in cloud architecture, but on a private server for them rather than public server. So I think it's a matter of what's the right solution for the particular component of what you're doing, and pick and choose the workloads onto the right type of cloud.
That's great. Would anyone like to add anything?
Just briefly, I think it links back to a point some of us touched on in the first question, and it's that not all services, not all data, not all tools are created equal. What your kind of risk appetite or the potential risk might be in the MOD will be completely different to other government departments. So it's about that. It's about managing that risk appetite and making sure that you're putting most effort in the places that need most protection, I suppose. But yeah, I agree completely with everything David just outlined there.
And Dan, just while we're with you, what would be your advice in terms of kind of keeping on top of cybersecurity with the cloud? So not just in the initial period where you're making the migration, but during the whole life cycle, really.
Sure, I think 2 points really. The first, and this links back to what Simon and we're just talking about in terms of we need to start talking about cyber as an enabler of everything an organization does, rather than something that's just part of an organization or it's a risk to be managed off in some IT department somewhere. So I think that's number one. The second is how organizations in the public sector deal effectively with industry. There's some really great examples of strong public-private partnerships in the broader cybersecurity sector. NHS, as Mike's just outlined, is a really good example. So it's about that communication piece and making sure that you're absolutely right. You don't just implement it and then you're good to go forever. It's a never-ending journey, this, isn't it? And cyber's, I suppose, a bit of an attritional sport. Doing something is better than doing nothing. So let's keep plugging away, I suppose, is the message.
That's great. And in a way, I guess a lot of what we're talking about is how to, I guess, mitigate risk when it comes to cybersecurity in the cloud. But it would be great to think about the opportunities as well. I mean, for you, Helen, where do public sector leaders start to unlock value from their data safely and securely in the cloud?
Well, I think that's one of the things that's been mentioned before, isn't it? That actually, we have to go into partnership with people because we can't host these things on the cloud ourselves. And so through our procurement and tendering exercises, we have to make sure that we're asking the right questions in the first place so that people know what we're expecting of them. Because loss of data, GDPR, the fines are eye-watering. We haven't got that kind of money. to waste on something that should not have happened. And so having our data on the cloud and having it accessible and evaluating what we've got through, as David was saying, through the period of the lifetime. It's not just, like we've got it off the shelf, we've plugged it in and it's fine, and we just, get a new one in 10 years' time. We have to be constantly looking at it, and we have to be able to access the data in a way that benefits the residents of the borough. And also, we've had contracts in the past where to actually access our data would cost more, if we wanted to do it in a different way. And I think that's something that the public sector needs to be much more careful about going forward now, because, like we said, things change all the time. You might want to use your data in a different way, and actually it's going to cost you more. And commercially, I can understand that, but we need to be thinking commercially as well, I think.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm just aware that we've got sort of about 4 minutes left. So if there's any last questions, please put them through now. I'll try them, put them to our panelists. But kind of focusing on the opportunity, Simon, is there anything that you'd like to sort of add in that area?
Yeah, well, it's interesting actually, because I think when Helen was talking there, I started to think about smart cities, which is something that the government are very supportive of and are around the world now. So this is where we have, lots and lots of technology that integrates services to make life for the end user as easy as possible. And I spent a number of years working in the Middle East, where their cities are incredibly smart. Everything is done through a mobile app, and it works really smoothly. And that data is used very well. So I think that point about innovation is really important. And as Dan said there, and I sort of chuckled to myself as well there, because Dan and I know each other very well. And one of my frustrations is when we talk about cyber is a bit of a dirty word. Whenever we talk about cyber, we often talk about risks. We talk about the threats. Actually, we need to change the debate. Let's talk about the opportunity that it creates. It's a fantastic opportunity for organizations of all sizes to grow, to develop, to become more innovative, to benefit users and customers. And so we have to change our mindset. It's not to be seen as a cost, but to be seen as an investment.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'd love to get Dan and both of your last take on the opportunities, but I've just got a last question, so I'm going to put it to the panel. Delgit asked, what are the panel's view on managed SOCs? Don't know if there's someone who feels they can answer that. I'm not sure.
I'll just show my ignorance. I'm not bothered. SOCs. What?
SOCs.
Security Operations Center. So it's basically in the event of an incident.
Okay. Well, over to you then.
That's what I was just going to say. So it's just in the event of an incident, you've got a dedicated resource that will deal with that work for you. I think Dalgit's question is a really good one. Managed SOCs would mean potentially outsourcing that work to a professional organisation, and there are many of those around the UK and elsewhere. And again, I think the same principles apply. I think it's a good idea because ultimately, if there are any challenges to cloud security, if your data disappears or there are compromises, getting that access back as quickly as possible is absolutely crucial. And so that's where a SOC can really help. But again, I think it goes back to the point of how you select and choose that provider who delivers that service for you. So, again, an element of caution, working closely, being clear on what you want from it, and taking advice from government, particularly NCSC, I think can help you in that decision.
Thank you very much. And thank you for clarifying what SOCs are for those who don't know.
Thank you.
David?
I was just going to chip in a thought, which is that if you think of cybersecurity in terms of training and prevention and detection and response to the threats that are out there, the biggest value would be to spend more money on training, because a lot of the time it's us that are the weakest link.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that question. And we are going to have to wrap up, but I want to give David and Dan a final thought really on the kind of the opportunities, the positives, I guess, that we can take away as well. And David, maybe you first.
Well, I'm the one that's very positive about the idea of digital transformation using cloud technology as an enabler, and we've highlighted how complicated and complex it can be, and the choices that there are. But it's undoubtedly going to be the right way to move.
Brilliant, thank you. And Dan, the final thoughts from you.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on something Helen talked about in terms of the commercials. And I think, 25, 30 years ago, a lot of the cutting edge technology came from public sector. It's the complete inverse now. So for public sector organizations, it's about how can you engage with industry sooner rather than later to understand what your requirements are.
Yeah.
Too often we see, public sector organizations come out and say, we've got X money to spend and this is what we want to get. Quite often you can say industry want to say at that point, why don't you do this instead? It could be cheaper, it could be better, but it's too late in the day. So quick early engagement, I think, is the key.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We have run out of time. Our final panel of the day. Thank you to David, Simon, Helen and Dan for giving us your time and speaking to us on such a hot topic, that is secure by cloud. So thank you to everyone who's taken part today. It's been such a fascinating day. We've covered a whole range of challenges, opportunities and hopefully solutions as we discuss public sector cyber security. Whether you are one of our many excellent panelists who've been with us today, or if you're part of our audience who've been sending in questions, a really big thank you from the team here at PSE-365. All that engagement makes such a difference to the flow of the day, and I hope that you've all taken lots away with you. Thank you also to our fantastic partners, without whom events like this basically wouldn't take place. Our next event will be on levelling up, which takes place on the 16th of November. So please do share that with your colleagues, as we'd love to welcome more new faces to the platform. Just a reminder that today's event was CPD certified. So that's 1 CPD point earned for every hour of live content that has been watched. Your CPD certificate will be with you within 24 hours of the conference ending. So do watch out for those in your inbox. From me and everyone here at PSE-365, a big thank you for being such a great audience, and we look forward to welcoming you back next time. Goodbye.